Welcome to this Boutiques Connect, everybody, with me, Musidi Mudise. It's great to have Lauren Walker from Currency Partners back here on Asset TV to give us or share with us some very valuable insights and research they've been doing around capital inflows in and out of South Africa since January 2016. So, a warm welcome back to Asset TV, Lauren.
Thank you, Masidi. I'm so excited to be back.
So, Lauren, being in the currency transfer business means that you get to have a lot of oversight on capital inflows in and out of South Africa. So, could you give us some insight into what the flows look like, particularly in the investment industry?
Yeah, sure. So I think what's important to understand is that the Reserve Bank requires that every payment into and out of South Africa is recorded, and it is recorded under a specific category that relates to the reason for the transaction. So in the investment industry or wealth industry in South Africa, the two main categories that are used are the resident allowances, which is the single discretionary allowance, the 1 million rand annually, and the foreign capital allowance or investment allowance, which is your 10 million rand annually. And those categories allow us to understand when a payment is made under those categories, what that volume looks like into and out of South Africa. And you'll see in the first slide that sort of gives you the volume from start to finish since 2016 until the full year of 2024, around that steady increase in volumes under those resident allowances year on year. You will see there that what we usually do is see a direct correlation between the US dollar rand exchange rate and the volume that is leaving the country under those allowances. So generally, the psychology is that if it's a little bit stronger on the rand, then more money would flow. But what we're seeing now is that that is no longer necessarily affecting that trend. The rand is still steadily weakening, but the flows are increasing. And in 2024, we saw over 160 billion rand leave South Africa under those two allowances. In 2016, we only saw just over 80 billion. So what we're saying is those flows have doubled in the last 7 years, and investment purposes purely.
So, what do you think are driving these numbers, Lauren?
Sure, it's quite a few things. I think we've seen a couple different trends in the market. Firstly, I think a lot of clients are actually asking and requesting for offshore exposure within their portfolio and investment. I think that the market itself and the financial institutions within South Africa have made it easier for South Africans to invest offshore. We also see a lot more competition in that space, not only within South African institutions, but also offshore financial services businesses coming to South Africa and promoting offshore. I think South Africans are becoming more astute in terms of their own personal investment too, and more of their advisors are looking at diversifying that portfolio to put a portion of their clients' investments offshore. So it's an accumulation of things, but I think it's definitely overall become easier for people to be able to diversify. And that speaks to a number of things, whether that's efficiency, but also knowledge and understanding what that looks like and why you would do it.
And do you see any other balance of payment categories having an impact on the wealth management industry and perhaps for advisors to step in to help people with some of their queries?
Yes, I think in particular there's two. The first one I would say would be those South Africans that have moved abroad and have completed their tax migration, so ceasing their tax residency and becoming taxpayers in other jurisdictions. We see those volumes, that's been a bit of a roller coaster because that regulation changed in 2021. So you will see in the next slide under the immigration flows that in 2021, the regulation was changed from financial immigration to tax migration. That meant that the Reserve Bank that used to run that process no longer is involved, and that entire application process sits with SARS. What that meant was the main change there was that you could not withdraw your RA when you ceased your tax residency unless you had been a non-resident taxpayer for 3 consecutive years. And you can see in those flows how the flows leaving South Africa had dipped significantly after that regulation change. And then the three-year rule comes to an end, and then you see the flows picking up again. Unfortunately, we do see a lot of South Africans moving to jurisdictions elsewhere in the world, though they underestimate how expensive it is to live in those first world countries. And they actually end up doing this process and withdrawing their retirement annuities in South Africa and externalizing that offshore to help them manage. Funny enough, though, we also see a lot of those South Africans coming home now for various reasons.
And what are some of those drivers out of interest? Because, for the longest of time, there's the grass has been greener on the other side. Crime and other things have had an impact. What
Yeah.
do you think is driving people back into the country?
I think the general consensus is that the whole world is a little bit crazy at the moment, so that has an impact. I think also we see that move home predominantly where South Africans have gone abroad and had children. I think it's tough in terms of support, being away from your family. And also, South Africans generally live a very free life. Well, that's sort of the feedback that we get in comparison to overseas. A lot of countries are very strict. I know Australia and Germany are often used as examples in terms of policing and rules, etc. And South Africa is actually quite a free country in terms of the way that we live. And we know that we're very spoilt in terms of landscape and where we live in terms of our lifestyle. So I think sometimes the grass is not as green as you think it is. And we're quite sort of a strong nation in terms of we're quite determined and we make things work no matter where we are. But family matters, and our culture, I think, is quite unique. So we are seeing a lot of South Africans coming home.
And onto that, you as currency partners have a lot of clients that are foreign. What trends are you seeing within that client base that is connected to South Africa but not necessarily domiciled here?
Yes. So the foreign clients get to us in two ways. The first one is through inheritances. We do see a lot of South African estates that end up with bona fide non-residents, as well as South African residents. I think that inheritance space, also speaking to the last question you had, also impacts the wealth sector quite heavily, because the beneficiaries of those estates are sitting abroad, which means that when there's a deceased estate, those funds are being withdrawn and transferred overseas. So a strategy around how to retain that wealth is quite important. There are quite a lot of bona fide non-residents, which means they have no ties to South Africa or have never lived here, within that inheritance space now, because so many children, their parents immigrated and they were then born overseas. So they are then seen as a bona fide non-resident. And then the second category where we see our foreign space is also in property. So we work with all the big property businesses in South Africa to help foreigners buy property in South Africa. And this is our feel-good transaction because we're bringing nice volumes back into South Africa. The trends here are very interesting, and we can talk through the reasons for that. But what's key here is that if you look at the capital transfers for non-residents into South Africa and out of South Africa, and specifically in the property space, that on an inflow basis increases every single year on year. It was reasonably flat between 2023 and 2024. And the reason for that, I think, was just there was a lot of distraction in the market in that period. But we're looking at 30 billion Rand in capital flows by these non-residents or foreigners, so no ties to South Africa originally, bringing money in for property. And that's an amazing thing to see. And when you talk to them and you understand why they're doing that, they are so pro South Africa in terms of, again, the lifestyle that we live, how lucky we are to live here, how free our life is, and also in foreign currency, our property is quite cheap for them. So it's a good purchase.
If you say a German retiree, your money from a purchasing power perspective can go such a long way living out, your retirement journey in South Africa, I suppose.
100%. And you look at the trend of that same category leaving South Africa, and that number is small and has never grown. And it's so interesting because over the last few years, we've had rumbles around elections, we've had Eskom challenges. Crime is always in the newspaper and in the media, not just in South Africa, but all around the world. And they are not unsettled by that. When it comes to Eskom, they go off the grid, they live in an estate. None of that impacts them. What is interesting is South Africa used to be a primary destination for foreigners, really in the retiree space. There's wine farms and golf courses and game farms, and it makes sense. We are seeing a big shift now to young families. There is now a nomad visa too, so you can get a visa which you can apply for online and you can work from anywhere. South Africa is one of those destinations. We are attracting a lot of those professionals. And for the young families, when you can work from anywhere, we've got great private schools. It's a dream to bring your kids up in South Africa with the way that our lifestyle is. And so we're seeing a steady increase in that space too, which is quite exciting.
And last question, Lauren, is that how can you, as currency partners, walk a journey with financial advisors that may have, some of the client demographics or profiles that you described, walk a journey to help them navigate the intricacies around bringing money in or taking money out of South Africa?
Yeah, so for us, we like to understand the wealth manager or advisor's business and what their goals are. We specialize in the exchange control element of all these processes and transactions. So it's very important that clients understand that there are rules around how money flows in and out of the country, but it's to protect us as a country and also to make sure that we understand that things are being done the right way. But we guide our clients through the right way of doing it. It doesn't mean the transaction can't be done. It just means that it's being done the right way. In the wealth space, there are a couple of transactions that we assist with, and predominantly, obviously, those 2 allowances, and also a lot of special approvals. So for clients that want to move money more than the 1 million or 10 million allowance, they can do more. They can apply to do that, and we do a lot of those. Although they say it's a special approval, we've never had one decline. So it has the word special attached to it, but it's not that exceptional. And our goal there is to help the advisor help the client and to add value to that process and to make it easy for the client. Our volume is quite significant, so we benefit from wholesale pricing on the exchange rate too, and that's very important. So the client gets a much more competitive rate than what they would get at their bank, and they get a good service. I think that's really important, and in that way, we're adding value to our wealth managers business too.
Amazing. Well, it's been so great having you once again here on Asset TV. Thanks for sharing your valuable research that you're doing as a company, Lauren.
Thank you, and it's so nice to be back, and thank you for the session.